Okay, well, can I give you all a very big welcome to the Buddhist Society. This is our first special occasion. This is our first Zoom public lecture. And I hope there'll be many more after this. But we're doubly blessed. One is that we can meet like this at a time like this. We can all get together through modern technology. We're also blessed by the fact that Venerable Amaro was talking to us tonight, and he explained that this is the only meeting that he's taking except for the WASAC meeting with the UN. And so he's only taking Zoom meetings, although he's been asked to do many, but ones that were previously arranged. So a very big welcome to you, Amaro. Thank you so much for coming and visiting us here. And the title of tonight's talk is a wonderful title. It was chosen long before the COVID appeared, Spring and the Promise of Renewal. Well, what I should say, just in introduction, that Venerable Amaro is the abbot of Amaravati Buddhist Monastery. She's a Theravada school in the forest tradition in the Theravada school from northern Thailand. And his preceptor was Ajahn Chah, a distinguished and famous and wonderful, inspiring teacher, and also Venerable Sumedho. But I don't want to take up any more of this precious time, but pass over to you, Venerable Amaro. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, really, thank you.
Oh, my pleasure, and feel very happy this has come together, and credit to your team at the Buddhist Society, Desmond, your son Odin, and Marlon and others. So I'll just begin my talk in a traditional way and then offer reflections on this theme of begin again, spring and the promise of renewal. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. As Desmond said, this title was chosen long before the coronavirus epidemic and this current situation that we have of, say, enforced retreat for much of the human population around the world. And I feel that the issues of hope and belief and fear and promise of say, potential beneficial possibilities and fear of unbeneficial, difficult possibilities are very much in people's minds. So it was I feel a fortunate choice of topic. And also this being April and say the middle of springtime here in the UK, and a very abundant and florid springtime, beautiful sunny weather, that it occurred to me to start with a quotation from T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tubers. So that's an interesting reflection on the possibilities of change, and really expressing what we would call in Buddha Dhamma vibhava tanha, the desire to not feel, and how the spring rains of April coaxing the lilacs out of the dead ground is reflecting on that. I'd rather be asleep, or can't I just ignore all this, or can I just stay numb while this all goes away? But the power of spring is it wakes things up. The lilacs arise, the daffodils, the birds start nesting, the leaves burst into form, and the earth comes alive. So whether we like it or not, there is the renewal of spring that brings with it these qualities of awakening, and a new life comes into the system. So what I'd like to offer this evening is, say, reflections on the quality of renewal, and using the image of spring and the arising of so green and growing life in the springtime as a way of representing a spiritual renewal, and what kinds of renewal are really beneficial. But maybe the first thing to address is that just because something is cyclical, because there is a renewal or a beginning again, it doesn't mean to say that's particularly useful or beneficial. Samsara means endlessness. It is like the endless cycle. It's that endlessness itself. So that just because something is beginning again, or it's carrying on, it can just be the same old, same old. It can just be a repetition of habits. It can be a vicious cycle. So that just because something is renewing or starting over, there's not an automatic positive quality to that. So I feel that that's also good to bear in mind, that we can take that the quality of repetition, and it just becomes a habit. It's representing a quality of becoming inured, or it's just the same old things over and over again. The kind of old and cold and settled in his ways, hardness of the heart. So also using the word promise, the promise of renewal, I feel it's also good to consider some of the spiritual conditioning that we have, not just from the Buddhist background or the Southern Buddhist world, but from the Judeo-Christian background, also some other Buddhist traditions or other spiritual traditions around the planet, whereby there is a kind of promise of like, don't worry, everyone's going to go to heaven eventually, or we're all going to be taken up into the arms of the Lord, or that everything will be all right. And tell me everything will be all right. We'll all become Buddhas eventually, won't we? And these spiritual teachings, or these traditions, these ways of speaking are very common, very natural. But also I feel that one of the great strengths of Buddha Dhamma, particularly the Buddha Dhamma of the Southern Buddhist world, the teachings of the Pali Canon, is that it doesn't give you that kind of a childish promise. It doesn't say, oh, let mummy kiss it better and it'll go away. Don't worry, everything will be all right. That you never find that kind of a promise in the Pali Canon, in the Theravada teachings. The Buddha never says that. He never says, just if you do this, everything will be all right. Regardless of your actions or your attitudes and your intentions. You don't worry, we'll all get to heaven eventually. And sometimes people say that, we're all going to go to Nibbana, aren't we, Ajahn? So, well, if you want to understand things according to the teachings, certainly from the Pali Canon, it's that the teaching of the Buddha is that if you do the right things, it'll all be all right. But if you don't do the right things, it won't be all right. Samsara carries on, and the habits that we have of attachment, identification, the addictions we have to like and dislike, and the familiar, the loved and the hated, they will have their power unless we develop a skillful attitude towards it. So in terms of speaking about renewal, I'd like to focus on that quality of renewing our attitudes, or how we can use the traditions that we have, or the practices that we have, to renew the way that we see things, the way that we relate to our field of experience. The Buddha's teaching in this way, particularly from the Southern Buddhist school, it's in this way, it's not making childish promises that don't worry, everything will be all right, but rather it's actually putting it into the hands of the individual. It's the individual responsibility. If you work with your mind, if you work with your life in a skillful way, it will be all right. So it's more of a challenge. It's less comforting in some respects, but I feel it's more realistic and ultimately more liberating, because it's pointing to the fact that the strength is within you, that the qualities of the Dhamma are attributes of your own heart. And if you look within, if you say, open up your own heart, open up your own mind and look within, use the resources that are an attribute of your own being, then there can be a radical transformation, and everything will be all right. But if we're always hoping for, say, comfort or reassurance from outside, we create a dependency and a fragility, which I would say is ultimately not so helpful. There are spiritual traditions that rely very heavily on that kind of other power format, so I'm not negating that, but I feel that that's one stage of the practice and relating to the powers of the universe as being outside, but ultimately those powers from the outside of great deities or teachers or our spiritual friends, that the presence of those external qualities, their value and their real, say, capacity to bless our lives and to liberate the heart is really, what do we do with those inputs from outside, from other beings, from our friends or from our teachers or our spiritual mentors, from deities of various kinds. It's how those are received in our heart and how our heart is allowed to be transformed that really makes a difference. So also talking about promise, again, we often can relate to spiritual teachings, and particularly at this time of a lot of fear. There's a large amount of time and energy being spent on looking at how things are going to turn out, what we're hoping for, what we're afraid of, what we believe is the truth. How many people have got the illness? How many people have died? Statistics vary. Where are the possibilities of cure? What is making it worse? What is making it better? There's a lot of questioning, and so that the mind easily moves towards hope and belief, and again, many spiritual teachings say point towards what you should believe in or what you can hope for. But I thought it would be also useful to speak this evening about a slightly different perspective on that whole area of how we deal with the unknown, because essentially hope and belief and even fear are ways of filling up the unknown, that when the heart is faced with a future that is unknown, we don't know what's going to happen, we don't know how things are going to be, we create a belief to fill up that gap, or we create a hope to fill up that gap, or even a fear, or even that somehow gives a sense of reassurance, spelling out what we're dreading. So in Buddhist psychology, there's a different quality called saddha, or faith. And even though in English, faith and belief might be seen as interchangeable terms, I would say that they have a very, very different quality. So both, and again, it depends on how you use the words, but generally, faith and hope are not the same thing. Faith and belief are not the same thing, because hope and belief, they somewhat revolve around the qualities of self-view. I hope, I believe. And so that there's always a sense of I and me and mine tied up with those emotions, or those mental habits. Whereas in Buddhist psychology, the quality of faith can be completely free of self-view. So when we use the word saddha, or faith, how is that different from belief or hope? What's the difference? And when I speak about a promise, it's really the quality of saddha, of what do we have faith in? What can we genuinely have faith in that is going to be furthering the quality of liberation and awakening? So saddha is really a quality of confidence. It's opening the heart to the unknown. You still don't know what's going to happen. There's an opening to the unknown, but it's a readiness to step forward into the unknown without knowing where your foot's going to land. It's a readiness to step into the dark. You're not having to pretend that you can see or fill up the dark or the unknown with an idea of what's there, but it's the bravery, the courage to step forward and to say open the heart to the unknown. So when the unknown is met with the attitude of self-view, then generally what we experience is fear, or we have a belief that we hang on to. But when the heart meets the unknown with saddha, with faith, then what arises from that is a quality of wonderment. There's an appreciation of mystery. You don't know, but there's no need to fill up that unknown with a worry or a plan or a belief or a hope or an opinion. It's the heart is more content to let the unknown be the unknown, but there's a readiness to attune to that, to be receptive to it, to step forth into the unknown. A little story I like to tell about this quality is many years ago I read an account of someone, an applicant to Cambridge University, and she was sitting the general paper. And for those of you who are not familiar with this, so if you're going to Oxford or Cambridge, you have two sets of papers. One is on the subject, whether it's English literature or sciences or sociology, and the other is a general paper. And in the general paper, at least in those days, you used to have 2 essay questions, had 2 essays to write over a 3-hour period. And so you had to sort of represent your own understanding or your own, say, intelligence, imagination, and kind of readiness to deal with difficult issues. And the questions on a general paper could be extraordinarily broad. And so it could be something like, you know, why are we here, or what's wrong with the French, or it could be almost anything and everything. On this particular general paper, there was the question, what is bravery? And this particular applicant for the university wrote for that entire essay question 2 words: "This is." And she got full marks for that reply, which is kind of unheard of, to get 100% on an essay question for an Oxford or Cambridge entrance exam. But it was a very good demonstration. This is bravery. You want to know what bravery is? Here it is, a 2-word answer to an 1.5-hour long essay. So sadha is that kind of bravery, but not an egotistical bravery, but an openness of the heart, a readiness to receive the unknown. And so that when we are in this COVID-19 virus epidemic, you know, the millions of people around the world have been infected by this virus. Many more, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, our lives have been touched and have been rearranged on account of it. So that the vast proportion of the human population are living in disrupted and unfamiliar ways on account of it. So it's a challenging situation. And so I felt that this theme of renewal and possibility and revisioning things is extremely appropriate, because we've all had to revision. I mean, the very fact I'm giving a Dhamma talk through a luminous rectangle rather than in a room full of other humans, that's a unique thing. We have to revision and review the way that we function, the way we operate. And our sense of togetherness and our sense of where we are is also got to be rearranged. Now, are we in the Buddhist Society? No. Well, maybe Desmond and Odin and Marlon are in the Buddhist Society, who are running this meeting, but the rest of us are all over the planet. So where are we? We're in this meeting, but it's physically disincarnate. It's arupa. It's formless. It's unlocated in many ways. So one of the things I thought would also be useful to talk about is the traditions and customs that we have of renewal, both here in our Western tradition. We have, say, January the 1st, December 31st, January 1st, the New Year, and the tradition of New Year's resolutions. Around this time in Southern Asia, India, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Burma, Laos, Cambodia, throughout the Southern Asian world, this is also New Year. April 13th, 14th is a New Year period. And it's a time of renewal. This in South Asia, it's a water festival. This is this period, middle of April, is the middle of the hot season. So they have a ceremony, sprinkling water, pouring water to ritually purify things, to in essence to invite the monsoon to come, to bring life back to that dead ground, even though it's a hot dead ground rather than T.S. Eliot's the dead land of winter. It's the baked dry land of the Asian subcontinent, but it's still inviting the rain to bring back the force of life. So there are these rituals and customs about renewal that we have. New Year's resolutions. Also, every fortnight in the monastery we have a process of confession, like in the Catholic Church, a there's a process of confession, going to the priest in the Catholic Church, or in our monastic routine, going to another nun or another monk before our fortnightly recitation of the rule, and acknowledging any faults, any transgressions that have occurred in your conduct, in your speech over the previous 2 weeks. And so we have these customs of, let's say, acknowledging that, yeah, I could have done better. Last year I could have done better. Last fortnight I could have done better. So let's begin again. And again, that's the theme for this evening, to begin again. So we have this process, or a ritual confession, of acknowledging the different categories of offenses, and then your fellow monastic that you're doing the confession with says, do you recognize these are a fault? And you say, yes, I recognize it. And then the follow-on from that is that having recognized these offenses, I will endeavor to do better in the future. So we're also making New Year's resolutions as a recognition of I had these bad habits. I've been drinking too much coffee, or I want to stop drinking alcohol. I need to stop smoking cigarettes, or I need to spend less time on social media, become a Zoom addict or a Facebook addict. We might see there as destructive habits that we have, and we take that juncture of the new year to begin again. And I feel that this is something that the Buddha recognized, that we are creatures of habit. The human family, we follow along in familiar ruts, familiar patterns. We do become old and cold and settled in our ways. That was Joni Mitchell rather than the Buddha saying that. We get stuck in ruts very easily. And so taking this opportunity, say in the monastic tradition every fortnight, but also we have traditions of asking for forgiveness, that we have when we arrive in a new place, in a new community, or we've spent time together on a retreat. At the end of the retreat, you have a ritual asking for forgiveness, and you say, by body, speech, or mind, whatever I have done that has been hurtful or painful or irritating to you in any way, whether it was intentional or unintentional, I ask for your forgiveness. And then the elder, the person who's sort of leading the ceremony, says, I forgive you, and please forgive me also. So again, just like the confession before the recitation of the rule, or the New Year's resolutions, or any of these other ceremonies, they can be an empty formal recitation of some words, some Pali words, or it's something that you forget about the next day. But if we take them seriously, if we apply ourselves with a good heart and in a substantial and sincere way, then they can be very powerful tools, because the fact is that we can change our direction. We can reform our lives. We can renew and reform. And the potential to get out of those ruts and to do things differently is something that the Buddha recognized. And he created many of the structures of his teachings and forms of practice to help us to create skillful habits, to recognize the unskillful and old habits that we have from the past, and to replace those with new habits. Another little story I like to tell, that I'm British by birth, English. I was born and grew up in Kent, so I'm very much a home counties English educated male. So I have a very English personality. And I went to go and live in California for 15, 20 years. And one of the things that really shocked me, or startled me, I thought I was a very eclectic, liberal kind of a character. But one of the things that really startled me was how easily American people, particularly Californians, or people who end up in California, could just rewrite their life. And so, again, I would think of myself as a liberal, freewheeling kind of a Buddhist monk, but in terms of personality, quite say receptive to people's character and different way of doing things. But I would be startled by someone saying, well, yes, I had this bakery, and I spent my life doing this work in the food industry, but I decided actually what I really wanted to do was to become a doctor. And so someone should give up her bakery business in her mid-40s and go to medical school. And I said, what, you're going to be a medical student? You're 45 years old. How can you do that? I might not say that out loud, but I just be feeling, or someone would say, well, I've been a professor of mathematics for a long time, but actually I'm more interested in architecture, so I'm going to go back to architecture school. Or someone would say, well, I have been an architect, but actually what I really want to do is to grow roses. And so I'm actually starting this organic garden, you know, and stepping down from their architectural practice. Or somebody who's a scholar of the Jewish roots of Christianity saying, well, I know there's only about 6 people on the planet who read my papers or any of my books, so I'm going to be a lawyer. And then they go back to law school in their mid-50s, and then now they're a public defender in Oakland, in Northern California. And so when I hear these stories, I go, but you can't do that. I mean, you're an academic, you're a mathematician, or you're a baker. You know, you can't just not do that. And that it was hearing the voice of my very middle-class English conditioning, you know, spluttering and saying, but you know, you can't just change yourself like that. And realizing, well, why not? Who says? Where does the rule book say we can't just rewrite our life? And in the word of one of those California psychology books, Scripts People Live, there was the same person who wrote Games People Play. I think it was wrote Scripts People Live. You can flip out of your script. You can rewrite your script. You don't have to follow the script that you've been given. So this quality of renewal is a lot to do with being ready to rewrite your script, to say, well, yeah, that has been a habit, that is a deep rut, but who says it has to be that way? So in this process of renewal, then realizing we can remake ourselves, we can rewrite our lives. And also part of that, and the quality of forgiveness within Buddhist practice, there's no concept of an unforgivable sin. There's no kind of concept of a permanent hell or an unforgivable sin. That everybody is redeemable. Every living being is redeemable. There is hope for everyone. And I feel that's a very powerful thing in terms of rewriting our life or say renewing. There might be that in the heart that says, yeah, but I've got this problem, or I've got this debt, or this terrible thing that I did, that can never be dropped, or this defines me and I can't let that go. I can't just drop that. I can't just put that to one side. This is absolutely who and what I am. So within the Buddhist perspective, it's, yeah, we might have character traits. We might have done some things that were unskillful, but everybody is redeemable. Everyone, there's no being that is not savable, as it were. So even the Buddha's cousin, Devadatta, who attempted to kill the Buddha and deliberately caused a division in the Sangha, it's said that even though, according to the Buddhist mythology, his wrongdoings were so egregious that the ground literally opened up and swallowed him into the hell realms, that even though at this moment it's said that Devadatta is down in one of the lower hell realms, it's also said in Buddhist mythology that his next lifetime he will become a Pacceka Buddha, like a Buddha, a fully enlightened being, but one who doesn't establish a Sangha. So even though Devadatta, who had extraordinarily unskillful actions in his last life with the Buddha, he will be a Buddha in his next life in the human realm. Similarly, Mara, who is the incarnation of wrongdoing and unskillfulness within Buddhist mythology, you might think, well, you know, Satan is definitely a write-off. And again, in the Christian thinking of things, in Christian mythology, in Paradise Lost, the kind of tragic poetry of Milton's Paradise Lost, there's this very poignant moment where Satan, Lucifer, says, "All good is lost to me, therefore let evil be my good." So it's impossible for me to be redeemed. I'm Satan, I'm the devil, so I can't do anything good. So therefore let evil be my good. So from the Buddhist perspective, even Mara is savable. And so that there's a very interesting sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya called the rebuke to Mara. And it's a dialogue between the Buddha's second disciple, Mahamoggallana, and Mara. So one day, Moggallana is feeling a pain in his stomach, and he's had great psychic powers, and he looked within himself and realized this isn't just an ordinary stomach pain. This is actually Mara, who's invaded my body and is trying to cause me trouble. And so then Moggallana says, "Mara, I know that's you. Get out and leave me alone." And then Mara says, he can't realize it's me. I've got all my screens up. I'm completely covered here. I've got deep encryption. You know, he can't know it's me. And Moggallana says, I know that you're thinking I can't know it's you, Mara, but I do know it's you. And I know you really well, because in the lifetime of a previous Buddha, the Mara of that era was called Dusi. And that Mara, one day trying to cause harm to one of the Buddha's disciples, entered into the mind of a shepherd boy and caused him to throw a rock, and it hit the head of the Buddha's chief disciple. And then that was such an egregious and harmful act that again the ground opened up, and Mara was swallowed into the hell realms. He said, "Do you know how I know that? Because I was that Mara. And you know how I know who you are? Is because that Mara called Dusi, he had a sister called Kali. Kali had a son, and that was you. So I was your uncle." So here you have Mahamoggallana, an arahant, an enlightened being, the Buddha's second disciple, and just, you know, relatively speaking, a few lifetimes ago, he was the embodiment of evil in the universe. So even if you think, oh, it's just fairy tales or it's just mythology, you know, mythology carries on because it's useful. It gives us meaningful messages. And so that I feel that just as a symbolic value that of that tale is that nothing that we have done makes us unsavable, or that we can't be liberated. No rut is so deep that it can't be transcended. It can't be risen out of. So I feel that in terms of how we relate to our experience, then it's and how we redeem, how we renew and say revision our lives, kind of see them in a different way. It's a three-part process really. Firstly, with respect to the past, to look into the past and to learn from it. You know, as George Santayana, the philosopher, said, you know, those who do not learn from the past are condemned to repeat it. So I feel that's a very wise and appropriate saying. So we look at the past, not to dwell on it or be filled with regret or pride or nostalgia, but to learn the lessons. What does the past teach us? What did we do? What did we say that brought harm and confusion? What did we do or say that brought benefit and blessing? What did we learn from the people that we were with that was beneficial and helpful? What examples did we see that were destructive and causing chaos and difficulty? So we look at the past and learn from it, but without dwelling on it, without attaching to it. Similarly with the future, to plan for the future, to look into the future, to give ourselves a goal, to develop skillful goals, not to be defined by, I want to become this, or I've got to do that, or I will be this or that in the future, but rather taking the lessons from the past and using them to skillfully set a direction. You know, that we have various Buddhist teachers who would, people like Krishnamurti would talk about, you know, a truth is a pathless land or journey without a goal. But within the Pali Canon and the Southern Buddhist world, there's a goal. Liberation, enlightenment, the realization of Nibbana, that's the direction. We talk about the Eightfold Path. It's a path insofar as it's heading towards a particular destination. That's what makes it a path rather than just a piece of ground. So we can set skillful goals, but without being defined by that. But the third part of say this potential of renewal and revisioning is to wake up, to use the present to wake up. So when we are, say, looking into the past, we're seeing where we caused ourselves difficulty, we caused others difficulty, learning from that, setting skillful intentions to give up your, you know, too much social media or caffeine or alcohol or whatever it might be that you see as a destructive addiction or a habit that you've got into, or maybe self-criticism is a destructive habit, or just being habituated to a particular meditation method or a certain, say, way of following a routine. So whatever it might be, to learn from the past, to set a goal for the future, but essentially, and the part 3 is really the most important, which is to wake up in the present. And so this is what the Buddha's encouragement in the Vāddeka Ratta Sutta is another of the discourses from the middle length sayings, the Majjhima Nikaya, where the Buddha said to not encouraged a spiritual seeker to don't dwell upon the past, don't dwell in the imagination of the future, and in the present moment, be alert, be awake to every presently arisen state. So wake up, and that's really the most, say, powerful fuel for revisioning and renewing our life, and to say the promise of renewal, of renewing things in a way that steers them in a skillful direction. The fuel for that revisioning and making it work, rather than just being a hope or an idea in your mind, is wake up in the present, to be using this moment to say, be alert to, as the Buddha puts it, every presently arisen state. So I began this this session quoting from The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. That was written in 1922. That was around the time James Joyce published Ulysses, and then shortly after that he began writing Finnegan's Wake, which many people find an impenetrable book. As an aside, I've actually read Finnegan's Wake from beginning to end, and I feel it's one of the best representations of the human condition in the written word. I also acknowledge it's pretty arcane and hard to penetrate, but just in the title, there people think of it as Finnegan's Wake as the funeral of an Irish hod carrier, and the title of the book comes from an old music hall song, lots of fun at Finnegan's Wake, but James Joyce in the title very deliberately has Finnegan's without an apostrophe between the last N and the S. So it's Finnegan's as in it's a plural, not a possessive. So Finnegan's Wake. So it's a call to awaken. And from having read various commentaries and getting a feeling for the book itself, it's an encouragement, an admonition, if you like, to wake up. So the Finns awake again. So Finns awake again, waken again. And so that say title for this evening's talk, Begin Again, it's a resonant of that same exhortation or encouragement from James Joyce's book, Finns, as in human beings, the human family, wake up, take this opportunity to awaken. So the last part of the say reflections I like to offer this evening, in terms of revisioning our life and in terms of awakening and how we can effectively say use these teachings to help ourselves and all those who are whom our lives impact, is to revision our life goals and to see, well, what do I look forward to in life? And I feel one of the things, I'm somewhat of a fan of mythology of various different kinds. And one of the things I feel that in the current times, particularly in the West, is we really lack a mythology of the goals of life. There's a lot of benefits that have come from secular materialism and the scientific age, and the kind of education systems that we have, and also the say transcending of old and say familiar religious forms that have dominated the Western life. But I feel we kind of lack a mythology in the Western secular world in particular. And so that for most people, what we can look forward to in our life, or the goal of our life, is having a comfortable retirement, a good savings plan, being able to get into a good nursing home, or having a good nursing, team to look after us, and hoping that our children or our grandchildren get into good universities, get good jobs, have good relationships. And that's the most we can look forward to. Even the sort of happily ever after ideal of finding a romantic life partner and living happily together forever, that's less of a thing that's put into people's say experiential sphere as children nowadays. That there's so many broken marriages, so many people coming from homes with a variety of parent-child structures. But in many, many ways, I would suggest, and this is I would say, just a personal perspective, I feel we lack a mythology of what our life's potential is. If all we can look forward to is a comfortable retirement and hoping that we live without too many debilitating illnesses and we don't run out of money or die lonely and say, in a way separated from our loved ones, that's the best we can do with our life. I mean, that's understandable enough and natural enough, particularly during this time of the pandemic, and not wanting to die alone and wanting to be close to family. Certainly those are important things in our human conditioning. But I feel in terms of a life goal, having a comfortable retirement situation and getting your kids and your grandchildren into a good college, we can do better than that. So I like to encourage a real revisioning of the potential of our lives. So rather than thinking of just carrying on in quiet desperation and sort of bumbling through our life and hoping that it's not too uncomfortable and lonely when we get to the end, we can set a direction towards enlightenment, to at least direct our attention towards realization of stream entry, that this is a doable goal for us as human beings, and that I don't feel it's unreasonable. And when you ask someone, what is the goal of your life, or what do you look forward to in life, how many people say sainthood or anything of equivalent? We're kind of embarrassed about spiritual development. And maybe that's a Southern English conditioning as well. But to say that I want to steer my life towards spiritual emancipation, towards an unshakable well-being, in terms of spiritual development, that seems sort of weird or remote or flaky. But I feel that it would be very helpful for us to take this on more consciously as an archetypal form to steer our lives towards a realistic goal. And so in terms of, say, setting that intention to use our life, whatever age we might be, whether we are healthy or sick or however much time we have left, none of us really know, to say, that's my intention, to set the direction to awaken to the Dhamma, to realize that irreversible insight into reality, what we call stream entry, or the realization of the deathless, that the breakthrough to the vision of the Dhamma. So the last thing I would share with everyone this evening, before we have the time for questions, is that there are 4 qualities that are said to be supportive of stream entry. And these are all doable within our lives. I would say these are all practical guidelines for us to set a direction towards that as a life goal. So the first one is in Pali, sapurisa sangseva, drawing close to good people. So who do you spend your time with? Who do you listen to? Where do you put your attention? So sapurisa means a good person or a noble person. Sangseva, drawing close to good people. So being discerning about spending time with people who are inclined towards goodness, who are inclined towards unselfishness, who are inclined towards generosity and spiritual development. The second one is sadhamma savana, so listening to the true Dhamma. So it doesn't mean to say necessarily it has to be Theravada teachings or people from the forest tradition. I wouldn't say it needs to be that narrow at all, but taking the time to listen to read, to absorb skillful spiritual teachings that lead towards simplicity, towards clarity, towards a lack of complication, towards awakening, that encourage a fewness of needs, that encourage qualities of awakening. So sadhamma savana, listening to the true Dhamma. So whenever, I mean, nowadays we have a multitude of different media to use, the computer and the television and our phones and Dhamma books and all kinds of different channels whereby Dhamma materials in huge abundance are available. So if you can't physically go to Dhamma talks, then at least you can watch them on YouTube or Vimeo, or you can have Zoom events like this one. So that taking the time, setting the intention and following that intention through to bring skillful teachings into your field of experience. And the third one of the four is yoniso manasikara, which means wise reflection. So taking the trouble to look at your opinions, to reflect upon your moods. I'm feeling really happy. Where does that come from? Or where's this going to go? Or you're feeling unhappy, you're feeling sad, or there's a sort of quality of grief or helplessness. To look at that, so okay, there's a feeling of grief or helplessness. Where's this coming from? What's contributing to this? Yoniso manasikara is that exploring, looking at the origin of things, the way things work, how patterns are formed. So essentially, it's not just an intelligence of, say, pattern recognition, but it's an intelligence that is, say, unified with a quality of goodness. It's a recognizing how things work together, the relationships of causality, cause and effect, but particularly with an eye to what leads towards benefit, what leads towards liberation, what leads towards harmony, and what leads towards confusion and alienation, insecurity, what leads to more suffering. So that's the third one. And the last one is Dhammanu Dhamma Patipada, which means practicing the Dhamma in accordance with Dhamma. So that might seem a bit of a tautology, or like, well, how do you get two Dhammas in there? So practicing the Dhamma in accordance with self-view, it might be, I want to be the first Arahant the first member of the Buddhist Society who's an Arahant, or I want to be a famous spiritual teacher, or I want to practice because in this particular way because my teacher told me I should do this practice, so I'm never going to do any other kind of practice because I'm faithful to my teacher, so I'll always do it this way. So there can be a practice of what sort of Dhamma in text. So it's you're correct, you're following the formula, but the spirit is out of kilter, is out of whack, so that the mind is making assumptions, or it's following a formula, it's doing things by a particular system, but it's not really in tune with the reality. And so practicing Dhamma in accordance with Dhamma is, yes, you're following the meditation practices, you're say adhering to the precepts, you're carrying out acts of generosity and kindness and compassion, but that's not motivated by self-view or motivated by compulsion or just blind obedience, but rather it's motivated by mindfulness and wisdom. It's in tune with Dhamma. So practicing Dhamma in accordance with Dhamma is, so you're not just doing your Dhamma practice by the book, but rather it's also guided by the heart. So you're not just right in fact, in the text, but you're also right in terms of fully balanced and attuned to the reality of things. So in terms of our theme for this evening, begin again, spring and the promises of renewal. I would say the breeding lilacs out of the dead ground, that sense of potential, the force of life rising up from the sleeping earth of winter. That's a good symbol for that. That's that potential of true life, of the awakened heart to rise out of the sleeping ground, the dead ground of self-view and ignorance, and that potential is here. And rather than begrudging it, like in T.S. Eliot's sort of slightly nihilistic Vibhava Tanha tone of the beginning of the Wasteland, it's rather that it's a challenge to rise up to. Something in us might want to switch off, but we don't have to. We can do better than that. And that if we learn from the past, we learn from our own mistakes or the mistakes of the world around us, we're informed by that, and we set a skillful direction, and then in each moment we take the opportunity to wake up, to free the heart from self-view, from conceit, to attune the heart to the way things are here in the present, to genuinely awaken, to wake up, and then our life can genuinely move towards a goal of great spiritual fulfillment. And so we can maybe thinking, well, to be setting the goal of stream entry as, oh, it's too ambitious, or I don't want to be inflated, or I shouldn't be thinking in those sort of ambitious ways. If it's held skillfully, then it's I would say it's an actualization of the potential of the path following the path to its intended goal of the cessation of suffering and the true liberation of the heart. So I see that the clock has gone round to 7:30, so I've been speaking for about 45 minutes or so, so I will leave it there and open things up for questions. And Desmond Biddulph, the president of the Buddhist Society, has very kindly agreed to select some of the questions that have come in from everyone.
Yes, thank you very much. It was a really wonderful and inspiring talk. It was an absolute joy at this difficult time to hear your recollections, your reflections on renewal. And it is the most important thing, isn't it? Is to go with that transforming energy and allow it to take you into new lands. But there are several questions here, and the first one is from Gila in Germany. Please, could you give your views on coronavirus and karma?
Coronavirus and karma?
Yes.
Well, I'm not an expert on epidemiology, but I would say that the Buddha's teaching is one of the first one of the 5 subjects of frequent recollection is I am of the nature to age, I have not gone beyond aging. And then the second one is I am of the nature to sicken, I have not gone beyond sickness. And the third one is I am of the nature to die, I have not gone beyond dying. So I would say that the human condition is one that is subject to illness. This is not a mystery or anything that's strange. This is a very fragile and say dependent organic system. I studied physiology in university many years ago, and one of the conclusions I came to after 3 years of going through various different courses was that how can this thing work? This body of ours, it's so complicated, it's so amazing. There's billions of chemical reactions that have to occur in a fluid and effective way every second. How on earth do we do anything? How are we even alive? That we can function at all, let alone being able to walk and talk and think, is flat out miraculous, amazing. So coming into Buddha Dhamma after that, I encountered Buddhism after I finished my university degree. It was like when coming across this teaching of aware of the nature to sicken, my first feeling was, yeah, right, of course. So in terms of karma, karma just means action. But I think that probably the question is coming from, is this the results of a particular actions being taken? Some sort of payback? Is this some kind of karmic payback for some sort of wrongdoing? I wouldn't go so far as to say that. I think that the human condition is such that we are vulnerable. These bodies are delicate. The system of living beings, plant, animal, virus, bacteria, archaea, the different strands of the living realm, they're constantly evolving and changing. And just as the flu epidemic of 1919 that took out millions of people, more than 10, 20 million people died from that illness. It's part of the human condition is that we are frail. The bubonic plague of the 17th century and then the 14th century, 2/3 of the human population of Europe died in the 14th century on account of the bubonic plague. So I don't really see it in terms of karmic payback, more like this is part and parcel of the condition of living beings, and so that our potential or the opportunity that we have right now is to work with this and to, in a way, to take this teaching that we are not in charge, that we are not in control. We might like that idea of being the ones who sort of the masters of the planet, but this is a powerful teaching of humility, like, no, we are not. And that if we take that to heart, that's not something that's frustrating, but rather it's liberating. It's like, oh yeah, we never really were in charge. We have always been part of an organic system. And so that illusion of control was something that was perhaps destructive or obstructive. And so that I feel that the urge to blame somebody, or blaming the Chinese people with the animal market, or the people doing experimental work in the lab, I think that's all, one can leave that aside. That's all speculation. What we can know is that this particular illness is spreading, and we can take this moment, this opportunity to awaken, or we can take it to create anxiety and aversion and cast blame, none of which is very beneficial. That doesn't benefit you or other people.
And there's another question which really follows on logically on from that, and it's from Ione, and it's when we've already become gripped by panic, what methods are there for calming down?
Well, I would say, even in those words, we have already become gripped by panic. I would say that is not a permanent condition. Another of the Buddha's teachings, which is very relevant in this respect, is Sabbe Sankhara Anicca. All conditions, things are impermanent. So you might say, I'm panicking, and have the idea this is a permanent condition. But I would say that would be the first permanent condition in the history of the universe, or any universe. So that means that in the set of advice I was giving, looking at each presently arisen state, it's like, in this moment, there's a feeling of panicking, but it's not there all the time. And to notice those moments when it goes away, when you're in the middle of brushing your teeth and you realize, oh, I forgot to be in a panic. I was just doing my toothbrush thing. Oh, I forgot to get upset. Or you find yourself laughing at a cat video, and you completely forgot that the coronavirus existed. And you think, oh, you might feel irresponsible that you forgot, but in that moment, there's a recognition, oh, this is not a permanent condition. I tell myself I'm panicking, but it does come and go. And I found I used to worry a lot. I used to have the idea, I worry all the time. And then, very helpfully being guided by Ajahn Sumedho's teachings, he said exactly the same words I just said to you. We tell ourselves that, like, I'm a worrier, I'm always worrying. He said, you're not. Worry comes and goes. Panic comes and goes. So that's one thing, is to bring the attention to the actual flow of experience, rather than your ideas about it, or the narrative that we tell ourselves about it. The second is to use the physical body as a reference point for that present reality, because the body is always in the present moment. It never wanders off into the remembered past or the imagined future. So the body is a guaranteed anchor for the reality of the present. So when there is a feeling of panic or fear, when that's there, we can take the attention off the particular thing that the mind is panicking about, a fresh piece of news, or the kind of a wave of emotion running through, and say, okay, that's an idea or an image that has brought this emotion about. How does this sit in the body? What's the somatic quality of this emotion? And so when we bring the attention to the body, and then not trying to do anything with it, not trying to get rid of it or explain it or wish it wasn't there, but just to know that feeling, just to, in that, say, recognition and opening the heart to that, there's a way that the mind which knows that tensing of the body, the mind which knows tension isn't tensed. It knows it as a feeling. So there's at least an intuitive sense of, this is something coming and going. This isn't here all the time. This is a feeling. And when say the news has been shocking or startling, or seen some image or something, a piece of information that is really grabbed your attention, it can be complicated or stressing. When you bring attention into the body, even the most, say, strong qualities of tension in the body, if you bring the attention to that, focus on that feeling without any kind of commentary, and my encouragement is to leave it as wordless as possible, just feel that. Then in that moment, this was extraordinarily helpful to me. I realized, actually, this isn't so bad. It's a bit like a tight shoe, or or like a mild headache, but it's not that bad. It's not unbearable. There's a kind of stressing quality or a heavy quality, but it's bearable. And so then we find that that quality of the feelings of the body, there can be an open-heartedness, an acceptance of that. It's like, oh, in this moment, it's just this feeling, that's all. It's this way. And the degree to which there can be an open-heartedness towards that sensation, then, as they say, if you've drunk from the stream, you've drunk from the source of the stream. To some degree, the heart has accepted where that emotion has come from. If that makes sense? So that by accepting in a non-judgmental or non-reactive way that the feelings of the body, because it's much less complicated. The physical sensations is a very simple language. It's not say ridden with a lot of information or complexity or associations. It's just this. It's this feeling. It's this way. So even if it's hot or tight or heavy, it's not complicated. So then opening the heart to that, then if you, the degree to which you're able to do that, you find that there's a way the heart can accept those feelings of stressing or panicking and not make anything out of it, not add anything onto it. So that the mind then is, is not so prone to run away with that and create a lot of conceptual thought around it. And so that you're receiving what is actually present. You're not suppressing it or just distracting the mind from it, but you're not getting lost in the mental proliferations, because a lot of the suffering around the virus and the global situation is what we call papancha, or conceptual proliferation, what the mind is doing with that wave of feeling or that perception. So that using the body as a fundamental, as a radical reference point, then it helps to unplug the papancha. It takes away the fuel from that papancha engine.
It's very, very, very useful indeed, particularly now. But there's another question. I realized that last one was actually not from Ione. It was from someone else. The two messages got sort of blended together. But what Ione actually wanted to ask you was, could you speak on the nature of choice and free will? Rather a big question.
Yeah, I'm not. You might have noticed I'm not very good at short answers. Well, this is one of those sort of old European philosophical questions, and it also goes back to the Buddha's time and the ancient philosophers of Asia as well. So, if choice was not genuinely possible, liberation would not be possible. So the Buddha Dhamma revolves around the capacity to choose. So there's in the European philosophical domain, it's often a debate between determinism and free will. Is everything fixed, or is everything kind of a completely open field? So what you have in Buddhism is that it's like everything is preconditioned. So what we experience now, like this Zoom conversation, me sitting here in my kuti at Amaravati and looking at the screen with a couple of dozen faces sprinkled all over it and having this conversation, and you in your various homes and countries and offices and wherever you might be. This experience is the result of the sum total of everything that's gone before. So this moment is completely preconditioned. But what we do with this moment, the way the words I choose, the way that you listen, the way I'm moving my hand, all of that is a choice that's made in the present moment. So that capacity to direct our intentions that's the escape hatch. So that the whole of the Buddha Dhamma revolves around that capacity to choose. So we're not a victim of the past. Everything is preconditioned, but what the mind does with that preconditioned array of perceptions and possibilities is up to the individual. And so that the degree to which the mind is, awake and freed from greed, hatred, and delusion means that the intentions and choices that will be made will be guided by mindfulness and wisdom and will lead towards beneficial results. The more that the mind is conditioned and say, steered by greed, hatred, delusion, opinion, habit, likes and dislikes, and so forth, then it will tend to more naturally veer towards things that are confusing or destructive or productive of various kinds of dukkha. So that say capacity to choose in the present moment, we often don't realize. And in a way, what I was saying in the Dhamma talk is that we have a lot more choices than we realize. I don't know how many times over the years where people have said to me, I've got to do X or Y or Z, Ajahn. I have to. I've got no choice. And I've said, well, you do. You're not a victim. You have the choice. And he said, well, no, I don't, Ajahn. You don't understand. And I said, well, I can understand that you feel you have no choice or there's no way forward. And I would say, but we don't have to believe that. That's a story we're telling ourselves. And I believe that also within Western psychology, a lot of the cognitive therapies that exist today revolve around that capacity to not believe our thoughts, to say, yeah, that's a thought. You're telling yourself, I don't have any choice, but that is a thought that arises and passes away. Who says it's true? What makes that an absolute reality? Why do we have to believe that? And so I feel one of the great strengths of Buddhist meditation, as well as cognitive therapies, is that we can not believe our thoughts. We don't have to go along with those judgments. So we can recognize there is a far greater field of possibility and choice in each moment. And it's up to us to recognize that possibility and to make use of that. And so that, but also I would say that that doesn't mean that the choices are completely chaotic, but I would say the more that the heart is freed from greed, hatred, and delusion, the more those choices will automatically move towards what is gentle, what is honest, what is kind, what is compassionate, what is unselfish. That's the disposition of the heart in its pure nature is towards what is beautiful and wholesome. So that when I talk about a freedom of choice, you say that the Buddha couldn't choose to kill someone. He couldn't choose to tell a lie because his heart just would not go in that direction. It's like that was not a possibility, but the range of it say examples he could use or similes he could come up with, or the way of explaining a particular theme, that was kind of infinite, and he could demonstrate that, and he did demonstrate over and over again in his teachings that extraordinary capacity to imagine and to explain and to illustrate. And so that when I say there's a freedom of choice, that's not sort of, I would say, every activity. So I would say that, and again, I don't want to go on too long, but for from the Buddhist understanding, the enlightened mind is only inclined towards skillful activity. And so that when we talk about freedom of choice, it's not an infinite range in terms of say, activities that a human can engage in, but there is a directionality in that. There's say an informed quality that revolves around the aspects of wholesomeness and unwholesomeness that is very much a part of that freedom.
It is amazing how complicated it's made in Western philosophy, isn't it? That question. But you made it very simple. There's another question here, which I think is really an important one for many people. And that's, what would you say to those who are living in the front line for 12 to 14 hours a day continuously at this moment? And it's from Lara Aguirre.
I would say sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Yeah, amazing. I'm really genuinely amazed and touched. And this is just like human beings at our best. You know, that level of self-sacrifice, of generosity, it's amazing. It's like our say capacity to rise up to a situation with amazing degrees of compassion, of kindness, unselfishness. Literally, just within the UK, there's dozens of people who have literally laid down their lives. You know, doctors, nurses, medical staff of many, many different kinds. The bus drivers, ambulance drivers, people who have lost their lives doing their work to help look after the ailing and the particularly the elderly, but also all dimensions of the sickened population. So I say amazing. So first, that's the first thing I would say was great, sadhu, and I heartily support your generosity and your kind of unselfishness. In terms of being able to do what you do, then I would say encourage people to the degree possible to not take your compassionate activity personally, not to take it as a compulsion. I've got to do this. I should do this. I have to do this, as something that is coming from a sense of forced obligation or a sense of guilt. But to the degree possible, just letting your own pure heart be the guiding force. There's a set of teachings that I like to, or guidelines I like to give with respect to compassionate activity that I came from a student of ours in California. He was a long-time Buddhist practitioner, but also was a therapist and a body worker. And he was actually one of the first people he had one of the very first online Buddhist presences. He was Mr. Dharmanet, a man called Barry Kapke. And so he used to teach these three principles to his students. The first one is, don't push, just use the weight of your own body. So if it's pushing to try and make things happen, I've got to do this, I should, I must, then we can easily overdo it. We can try too hard. But it's a leaning into a situation. Use the weight of your own body, naturally leaning into what needs to be done, using your own weight. So it's a kind of symbolic language, but I suspect most people in the caring professions will understand what that's referring to. The second principle was, don't try to help, but don't turn away. And that's talking about trying, that, oh, I should, I must, I've got to. And we get so focused on what I should be doing, we actually become out of tune with the person or the people that we're trying to help. I'm so full of my tryingness that I've lost touch with that which I'm trying to do and the person I'm trying to help. So don't try to help, but don't turn away. So that letting go of that tryingness, but opening the heart to the situation, and then being guided by that attunement to the time, the place, the situation. Do they need you to jump in and start pumping, you know, on their chest? Do they need you to just sit there and be quiet? What's needed in this moment? Do they need a comforting word? Do they need you to crack a joke? Do they need you to sort of make a sock puppet? Or do they need you to be very, very still and or sing a song? What do they need? What does that person need? And then the last one is don't diagnose, just be aware. Again, I'm a bit of a compulsive explainer. I like words and I like rational systems and everything to be orderly and have, you know, ABC 1, 2, 3 or everything in its little boxes. Like, to me, looking at this screen with all these faces in their individual boxes as a kind of, yes, you know, I do. I like the Microsoft Word tables program. Yeah, I really enjoy having little boxes and putting things neatly in boxes and lining them all up. So, and I like explaining and having everything make logical sense and be in order. So this is really good advice for me. Don't diagnose, just be aware. So the mind that wants to jump in and explain, now let me tell you about that. Well, actually, it's this way. And to pull the plug on the actually, and to instead be aware, again, to wake up, to not be so quick with an explanation, but to say attune to what's going on. There's a wonderful book by a Sri Lankan surgeon called Atul Gawande, a doctor who works in America, in the USA, called Complications. And it's about all the things that go wrong for a doctor, from messing up a surgery to having to deal with an alcoholic consultant who's got an inflated ego, It's a patient who you did everything right, but they still die. It's a absolutely marvelous, a collection of stories about what goes wrong for doctors. And I feel that's a really good resource to show us that we're not in charge. We can't always explain. We don't know what's going on. And so there's a few examples in that book where the doctor jumps in to make an explanation and realizes, I got that wrong, or I don't know what's going on. I feel I should be able to tell the patient, I know what's happening, but I don't know. I'm not sure what's happening. And that kind of humility, again, to realize I'm not in charge, I can't explain, and that it might feel like a weakness, or you're not doing your job as a doctor or as a carer. But I would say, in essence, I mean, I'm not a doctor, I'm a monk, but in that role of being a teacher, it happens to me as well sometimes, where someone will talk about a meditation issue or a spiritual event or a difficulty in their family. And if I remember to not just jump in with my stock explanation, like here's Ajahn Amaro explaining this, but rather to be able to say, yeah, that's an interesting question. Like, yeah, I don't know what the heck's going on there. Then at that moment, something in me goes, well done, Amaro. Good. You're not just filling up the gap with an explanation, because that's also how we fill up the unknown, with an opinion or an explanation, but to let the unknown be as it is. And then out of that, sometimes, and it's interesting how it works, sometimes out of that leaving it alone, just letting there be a bit of a spaciousness around a particular issue, to not just jump in with the explanation, being aware, then a way forward arises within that. And then you discover that actually there's a path. I didn't realize there was a path there, or there's a way to work with this that I didn't see at first. And you can be surprised by what turns out to be a good way forward that was not in your repertoire of good explanations. So in terms of people on the front line, I would encourage those qualities to the degree possible. Don't diagnose, just be aware. Don't try to help, don't turn away. Don't push, just use the weight of your own body. And again, knowing your own body, knowing how you're holding your emotional states, tapping into the feelings of the body moment by moment, that's a really helpful way, literally staying grounded. The body is your piece of the ground. This is our piece of the earth. So paying attention to our body is the best way of being grounded. So as we go along through the sort of 12, 14-hour days and exhaustion and feeling emotionally drained and challenged, to use the feelings of the body to say ground the attention, and to be kind to yourself. You are one of the living beings worthy of compassion and kindness, and so it's important to recognize that the nurse and the orderly, the doctor, the bus driver, the ambulance, your paramedic, the ambulance driver, that you're also one of the beings that needs to be helped and needs to be cared for.
Thank you very much. And I think there's just one last question, and I think this is a very interesting one, and that is, are there any exceptions to redemption?
Well, from the Buddhist perspective, I would say no, it's impossible. There's no thing that you can do that say makes a living being sort of irredeemably lost. Bearing in mind that we have our mythology of many lifetimes, and that say that the what we have in the teachings, that sometimes a person has carried out an act of such egregiousness, like say King Ajatasattu killed his father, King Bimbisara. And there's this really interesting point where the Buddha gives a teaching, the Samanyapala Sutta, the second discourse in the Digha Nikaya, and the king Ajatasattu has been there and he's listened to this extensive and wonderfully inspiring discourse of the Buddha. And after the king pays his respects and leaves, the Buddha said, if he hadn't killed his father, then he would have entered the stream hearing that Dhamma talk. But because of the karmic weight of having killed his father, then that insight didn't arise. So there can be things that are major obstructions, but just like Devadatta having tried to kill the Buddha and causing a schism in the Sangha, that kind of that was a major obstacle to insight, to liberation within this lifetime, but in a future lifetime, that the karmic effects of that will be burned off according to the stories, and that when Devadatta, the being that was Devadatta, is reborn in the human realm in the next time, then he will achieve full and complete enlightenment. So I would say that we might have done things in this lifetime that make it very difficult to, say, free the heart in any radical way, but we can certainly work vigorously to make things better, to improve our lot. There might not be liberation, but I would say that we can dedicate ourselves to goodness. Maybe a last little story to share. That many years ago, I met Air Chief Marshal Constantine. I had a strange illness myself. I had this a weird swelling in my neck that kind of sprang up overnight, and the doctors didn't know what it was. They had the humility to say, we don't know what the heck this is. And in our local area, I'm in Hertfordshire, and rare medical cases, or the ones that the GP and the local hospitals can't treat or can't diagnose, they were sent to the RAF hospital, the Royal Air Force Hospital nearby. So I was in this Air Force hospital with this weird sort of growth on my neck. And after I'd had surgery, and it was actually a necrotic lymph node. A lymph node had died in my neck. So I was being discharged, but the monastery van was late, and I was just left waiting in the hospital reception area for a long time. And this tall, sort of distinguished-looking gent with a thin white moustache had been around the hospital, and I'd seen him a few times, and he came up to me and said, can I talk with you? And I said, certainly. And so for the next 3 hours, the two of us sat together, and it was just one of these strange times. Like, it was just the two of us in this lounge area. The van was 3 hours late, so it was just the two of us talking. So he said, my name is Air Chief Marshal Constantine, and I was second in command of the bomber command in the Second World War under Bomber Harris. He said, I was responsible for the first 1,000 bomber raid. I was responsible for the raid on Dresden. And so, that's how he sort of began the conversation. So I was paying very close attention. He said, so I found myself in that situation. I joined the Air Force in the 1930s because I wanted to see the world, and I came from a poor family. So the easiest way to see the world was to learn how to fly. The easy way to learn how to fly was to join the Air Force. In the 30s, I was so clueless. I said, we're in the fighter squadron, sir. Who are the enemy? And he said, I was so clueless about global politics, and so was my commanding officer. He said, the French, of course. We haven't had a war with them for years. So the next war will obviously be with the French. So he entered into the military just a sort of childish, a desire to learn how to fly. The Second World War began, and it became clear that he had a talent for leadership, and he was promoted extremely rapidly until before he knew it, and he was in his early 30s. He was second in command of bomber command, and so he talked about, he wasn't trying to make excuses or ask for forgiveness really, but just sort of talking about how his life had taken shape. I wanted to share. I was just a sort of young Buddhist monk, a random guy he'd never met before. So it was quite striking to me how each increment had made sense until suddenly he found himself causing this massive destruction during the war. And he talked about the raid on Dresden. He said all we got was a telegram from number 10 Downing Street that simply said, Dresden, maximum impact. That was it, 3 words. So that was our job. It was a war. So you carry out your orders. And so then after the war, he said they didn't know what to do with me because I was 35 years old and an Air Vice Marshal. They didn't know what to do with me. So they started taking stripes off. And I didn't really have a job. So I said, well, I asked him to give me a plane. He said, so I went to every single German city that I bombed during the war. I spent 2 years visiting every place that I was responsible for bombing. And at the end of that period, I decided to dedicate my life to making sure that this will never happen again. So to me, that was, and then he was part of NATO, and so he was committed up to that point. That was before the Balkan wars of the 90s. He said, we've had 40 years of peace in Europe. That's the longest period of peace in Europe in human history. And so I was really strangely touched by that encounter. I'm not making excuses for the bombing of Dresden and that massive, an awful, say, destruction of life, but rather seeing how a person found themselves in that situation. Each step made sense, and then he found himself responsible for these absolute horrors, this sort of nightmarish horrors that had his name on. And so then that having happened, then what do you do? Okay, you know, how would he redeem himself? So that he said, okay, well, I've done this. I'm responsible for this. My name is on this. What can I do to make the rest of my life worthwhile? And so that's what the conclusion he came to. Okay, I can give every ounce of my strength to making sure this never happens again, to the degree that I can. And so it had a weirdly profound impact on me, and that sense of, okay, having made some drastic and enormously heavy karma, so the actions were incredibly destructive and say negative in a large array of dimensions. But that having happened, what do you do with your life? Well, like Angulimala in the Buddha's time, what do you killed all these people? What do you do with your life? So I would say, I wouldn't say that Air Chief Marshal Constantine was an arahant or a stream enterer, but certainly that motivation. Okay, that having happened, what can I do to use the energy and the time that I have, the position that I have, to try and make things better? So I feel that that sense of acknowledging what we've done, whether wholesome or unwholesome, but to whatever degree, really receiving that with an open heart, really letting yourself feel that, to know that, like Angulimala, what was it like for him to meditate as a monk after having killed nearly 1,000 people? What was going through his mind, remembering all those faces of the people he killed with his own hands? And then to really receive that, to shed those tears and to feel the compassion and the foolishness that was motivating your actions. But then taking that pain and using that pain to help you to do good, to wake up. And so I feel that in terms of redemption, or people being redeemable, having that skillful intention and doing the best that we can to use that pain as a force of awakening, that's the best we can do. And so that would be the advice that I give. If people do have those painful memories, terrible memories, or responsibility for having caused a lot of harm, and probably a lot less than someone like the Air Chief Marshal Constantine, that we take that painfulness, we have the humility to let that in, to know that, and let that be a driving force for the mind to awaken, and then to let that awakened attunement to the present be something that motivates us for the future. So I think
yes, that's such a wonderful, inspiring story, and a wonderful story to end the evening with. Okay, can we really thank you from us all? Thank you so much for all this time you spent with us. Thank you very, very much indeed. And I hope you have a very peaceful time as time goes on.
Best wishes to everybody. I can see a certain number of you on the screen. I see there's 86 people in the little participant block. So my greetings and good wishes to everybody, wherever you are. Stay safe. I hope all of you and your families and those dear to you are staying free of the virus, doing what you can to help it not be spread around everywhere. And if you're those of you working in the caring professions, again, sadhu, 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 and I really applaud from the bottom of my heart all of the good work that the people in the front line are doing. So, and I think the best we can offer, if we're not in the front line, is to stay home, stay healthy, and not be another patient on their wards. Okay.
Thank you.